My phone buzzed just as I was wiping down the kitchen counter, the scent of fresh coffee still hanging in the air. Avery Brooks flashed across the screen. I answered with a tired smile. "Hey, everything okay in Chicago?" I asked, thinking about her biotech conference she'd flown out for 2 days earlier. There was silence for a beat, then her voice came, calm and practiced, like when she negotiated contracts at her firm. "Ethan, I'm not coming back." What? My hand froze over the sink. "What are you talking about?" "I've met someone," she said, each word clipped and precise. "It's been happening for a while." My chest tightened, the words pressing against my ribs. I gripped the phone tighter. "Who?" What? Her sigh crackled through the line. "Nathan, my boss." I closed my eyes, breathing slowly through the nausea curling in my stomach. Nathan Hale, senior partner at her company's Chicago office, older, charismatic, and filthy rich. "He understands me, Ethan," Avery continued, her voice softening in false pity. "He sees what I'm capable of. He's taking me to Madrid for a while. Oh, and I've moved our joint account. My lawyer said it was wise to secure what's mine." What? The quiet in the kitchen felt deafening. For 12 years we built that account together, every promotion, every freelance job, every skipped vacation to grow our savings. I swallowed down the tremor in my voice. "I understand." "That's it?" she asked, the first crack in her composure. "You just understand." "I do," I whispered, then I ended the call. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the pale morning light filtering through the blinds. My reflection on the microwave door looked like a stranger, stunned, small, and utterly alone. If you've ever faced betrayal like Ethan's, or felt that chill in your chest when the truth cuts deep, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Our stories keep us strong, no matter where we stand today. Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the quiet Denver suburbs as the sun rose. The city was waking up, but inside his chest, everything felt frozen. He set his phone down on the kitchen table, its screen still glowing with Avery's name. Slowly, he walked to his study, flicked on the lamp, and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a thin folder labeled Trust Conversion, Ethan Brooks. His fingers hovered over it for a moment before he pulled it out and placed it gently on the mahogany desk. 6 months ago, he'd noticed the small shifts in Avery, conference trips that weren't listed on her company calendar. Dinner charges from restaurants she once said were too pretentious. Missed calls from Nathan at odd hours. Ethan was a financial compliance strategist. Patterns were his specialty. And these patterns screamed betrayal long before Avery whispered it into his ear. 3 months ago, he'd acted, quietly, methodically, like every risk assessment he'd ever done for corporate clients. He restructured their finances, creating a new joint account with a modest balance while transferring almost all real assets into a private trust under his name. The paperwork sat signed by Avery herself, who had scrawled her signature across each page without reading a word, too busy checking her emails under the dinner table. Now, as Ethan flipped through the documents, he felt no rush of triumph, just a calm certainty. The transfer Avery initiated last night for $184,000 from what she believed was their main portfolio. He checked their financial portal again, was sitting in the queue, flagged as requiring dual authentication for any amount over $10,000. A safeguard he had personally implemented. He closed his laptop, pressing his palms against its cool surface. In the pale morning light, he whispered to the empty room, "Not today, Avery." What? Then he leaned back in his leather chair, listening to the soft hum of his house, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath as the plan he'd prepared unfolded exactly as designed. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as memories flooded in. He thought back to the first time he met Avery, 17 years ago, at a financial compliance seminar in San Francisco. She was standing by the espresso bar, confidently explaining biotech portfolio trends to a group of older executives who listened with thinly veiled skepticism. Ethan had watched her from afar, intrigued by her certainty, her ambition, the way she gestured with her hands as if her words alone could move markets. 2 years later, they married. On their honeymoon flight to Maui, they mapped out their life together in the back pages of a hotel notepad. 5-year plan, 10-year plan, retirement projections, children by year 4, weekend cabin in the Rockies by year 7. They built their dreams like a mutual fund, balanced, strategic, always looking toward steady growth, but some investments never pay out. After 3 years of trying for a baby, a quiet doctor's office confirmed Ethan's low sperm count made natural conception unlikely. He remembered Avery's tears in the parking garage, her hands trembling against the steering wheel as she sobbed into her blazer sleeve. He held her that evening, promising they would explore other options, IVF, adoption, anything. But they never did. The conversation faded like an unpaid invoice, gathering dust at the back of their lives. Instead, Avery buried herself deeper into her career. More conferences, later nights, spontaneous weekend trips to close contracts. Ethan focused on his promotions at Levington Advisory, building a reputation for disciplined strategies that protected clients from sudden market collapses. Their home became a silent station between her flights and his 16-hour days. He thought about the last anniversary he had planned, a quiet cabin retreat in Vale. When he told her, she paused mid-email, eyes flicking up with polite regret. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I have an executive board retreat that weekend. I can't just cancel." That night he sat alone on the cabin deck, watching snow drift past the lantern-lit balcony, wondering when their life had become two separate ledgers that never reconciled. It was around that same anniversary when Ethan first heard Nathan Hale's name slip into Avery's conversations. "Nathan wants me to present at the annual summit," she said over dinner one evening, barely looking up from her phone. Another night, as she packed for a sudden 3-day trip, she mentioned, "Nathan thinks my analysis skills are wasted in my current role." Ethan watched her carefully, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about Nathan's projects. How she left her phone face down at dinner, how she stepped out onto the patio to answer calls, speaking in a low, measured tone, and how, when she returned, she wore that forced smile as if nothing in her world had shifted. One Saturday morning, Ethan came downstairs to find her laptop open on the dining table, password screen glowing. He brought her a cup of coffee, and as she walked past to take it, she typed in her password without hesitation. He watched her fingers move, Ava 8, simple, memorized. That evening while she showered, he typed it in. Her inbox unfolded before him. Confirmation emails for a weekend suite at the Grand Regent in Chicago, check-in for 2 adults. Restaurant reservations under her name and Nathan's. Attachments titled Quarterly Strategy, Private Review. Ethan didn't rage, didn't slam her laptop shut or confront her. Instead, he noted the dates and quietly closed the lid, each discovery falling into place like another row on a balance sheet. Over the next few weeks, he continued observing. Her perfume changed from subtle rose to something sharper, muskier. Her gym visits doubled, and her wardrobe shifted to sleeker cuts and deeper colors. One evening, she walked in wearing a sapphire necklace he didn't recognize. When he asked where it came from, she replied breezily, "Oh, just a vendor gift from the conference." He simply nodded, letting her believe he was still the quiet man too consumed by spreadsheets to notice the patterns unfolding right in front of him. But Ethan saw everything. Every transaction, every calendar discrepancy, every mile traveled on her loyalty program, and as each clue layered onto the next, he felt his resolve solidify into something unbreakable. He would not confront her with anger, he would confront her with precision. Ethan sat in his home office late into the night, the only light coming from his desk lamp casting shadows across stacks of client files and market analysis reports. But tonight his focus wasn't on projected growth charts or compliance audits. Instead, his eyes scanned a spreadsheet titled Personal Ledger OB. In column after column, he had recorded every anomaly. Dinner receipts at restaurants where Avery claimed she had client drinks but matched Nathan Hale's corporate card transactions on the same nights. Weekend Uber charges in Chicago when her calendar showed her attending a virtual summit from Denver. Hotel bookings with 2 guests under her loyalty account. Even small things, duplicate charges for coffee runs at upscale cafes, always near Nathan's downtown office. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard as he entered another line. July 16th, Grand Regent Suite, $582. Nathan corporate discount applied. He paused, staring at the note, then typed another in the margin. Password confirmed via laptop login 622. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. His chest burned with an ache that felt like betrayal and relief intertwined. For years, he had built a career identifying inconsistencies, risks, and hidden opportunities in financial systems. Seeing patterns was what he did best, but he never thought he'd need to use that skill in his marriage. He opened a locked drawer and pulled out the slim navy folder containing the trust paperwork he'd finalized 3 months ago. His signature sat neatly beside Avery's rushed scrawl. She had signed each page distractedly, scrolling through emails, not realizing she had signed away any claim to his primary assets. Ethan closed the folder, exhaling a slow, controlled breath. It wasn't anger that fueled him anymore. It was clarity. He knew what was coming, knew that when she finally decided to leave, she would try to take everything, the house, their investments, the savings account built from years of skipped vacations and frugal choices. He reached for his pen and added a final note at the bottom of the spreadsheet, all accounts restructured, dual authentication active for all withdrawals over $10,000. His hands trembled slightly as he set down the pen, not from fear, but from the cold finality of preparation. Ethan Brooks was ready for whatever storm Avery Hale planned to bring. Because this time he wasn't just a man blindsided by betrayal, he was a strategist, and she had just become the riskiest client he'd ever managed. The doorbell rang just after 8 the next morning. Ethan, still in his gray fleece pullover and black joggers, opened the door to find Riley Chen standing awkwardly on the porch. Riley had always been Avery's closest friend at Hale Biopharma, petite, sharp-eyed, dressed today in a charcoal suit with her hair pulled into a sleek low bun. But her expression carried an unease Ethan had never seen before. "Hey, Riley," he said, stepping aside, "come in." She walked in, clutching her leather tote to her chest. Her eyes darted around the living room as if searching for Avery's shadow. "She asked me to come get some of her things," Riley said quietly. "Her jewelry box, some winter clothes from the upstairs closet." Ethan nodded slowly. "She's not coming back, is she?" Riley pressed her lips together, gaze dropping to the polished floorboards. "No, she's already in Madrid with Nathan." A flicker of pain tightened Ethan's chest, but he forced his breathing to remain steady. "I see." Riley lingered near the kitchen counter, fingers gripping the strap of her tote until her knuckles whitened. "She also wanted me to check if her transfer went through," she added, her voice barely above a whisper. There it was. The real reason for this early visit, not clothes, not jewelry, money. Ethan walked to his desk, flipped open his laptop, and scrolled to the banking portal. The transfer request still blinked pending approval. He turned the screen toward her. "It requires dual authentication," he said calmly. "Anything over 10,000 does." Riley swallowed hard. She's going to be furious. "That's her choice," Ethan replied, his voice low and even. "The jewelry is in the upstairs safe. She knows the combination." Riley didn't move at first. Her eyes glistened for a moment as if words were caught in her throat. Then she nodded, turned, and walked briskly up the stairs. Ethan leaned against the kitchen island, listening to the faint sounds of drawers opening and closing above him. His gaze drifted to the framed photo on the wall, him and Avery on a hiking trail in Sedona, their cheeks flushed, smiling at the sunlit canyon behind them. He studied that younger version of himself for a long moment until Riley's footsteps returned. She carried a small suitcase and Avery's jewelry box tucked under one arm. "I'll let her know," Riley murmured, eyes avoiding his. She paused at the door, then left without another word. Ethan closed the door softly behind her, feeling the house fall silent once more. It was a silence heavy with endings and beginnings he could not yet see. The morning light filtered through Ethan's office blinds as he sat at his desk, the silence broken only by the soft ticking of the black metal wall clock. The transfer request on his banking portal still blinked pending approval. Avery hadn't called since Riley left with the jewelry box, but Ethan knew the storm was coming. He gathered the folder containing every piece of documentation he had compiled over the past months, hotel confirmations in Avery's name with Nathan Hale, restaurant receipts, duplicate expense reports, and the signed trust conversion papers. He slid them neatly into his leather briefcase, feeling the grain beneath his fingertips as he zipped it closed. Pulling on his navy blazer, Ethan paused by the hallway mirror. His reflection stared back. Tired eyes, a fresh shave, and a calm he hadn't felt in weeks. This wasn't rage, it was resolve. At precisely 10 a.m., he walked into the sleek marble lobby of Lawson & Reeves, his polished Oxfords clicking across the tiles. Thomas Reeves, his attorney of 12 years and former client, greeted him with a firm handshake. Thomas's silver hair and tailored charcoal suit gave him the look of quiet authority, someone who knew how to calculate risk and eliminate it. They settled into the conference room, and Ethan slid the folder across the table. Thomas flipped through the pages, his sharp eyes scanning each line without comment until he reached the final bank statement showing Avery's attempted withdrawal. "This is comprehensive," Thomas said, his voice low and even. "Financial misconduct, asset reallocation without consent, marital abandonment. Colorado doesn't require fault-based divorce, but this will weigh heavily in the settlement." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the patterns in the Persian rug beneath the conference table. "I don't want revenge," he said quietly, surprising himself with the calm certainty in his words. "I just want clarity, clean separation." Thomas leaned back, studying him for a long moment before replying, "That's exactly what you'll get." Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline gleamed under a pale winter sun. For the first time since Avery's call, Ethan felt a flicker of peace. This wasn't about anger or betrayal anymore. This was mathematics, the final balancing of an equation that had been off for far too long. 4 days passed without a single response from Ethan. Avery's calls came at all hours, morning, noon, deep into the quiet of night, but each went unanswered. On the fourth evening, as the sun dipped behind the Rockies, he returned home from the office to find her standing in the living room. She was still wearing her black wool coat, designer heels clicking against the oak floors she had once insisted on renovating. Her hair was pulled back into a neat twist, her makeup flawless, but her eyes were frantic and bloodshot. "What did you do?" she demanded, voice trembling with rage. "The money is gone, Ethan. You can't just take it." He set his leather briefcase down by the entryway, removed his coat, and draped it over the chair with measured calm. "The money isn't gone," he said, meeting her gaze evenly. "It's exactly where it's meant to be." She pulled out her phone, thrusting the glowing screen at him. The banking app still. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office early, greeting his assistant with a polite nod before closing the door behind him. As he powered on his computer, she slipped an envelope onto his desk. "This came by courier a few minutes ago," she said softly, her eyes flicking to his face with hesitant concern. "Thank you, Mia," he replied, giving her a small, reassuring smile. He waited until she left before opening the thick ivory envelope. Inside was a letter printed on heavy cream paper, the header embossed with the logo of Hayes and Dalton LLP. Ethan scanned the lines quickly, his jaw tightening. "Dear Mr. Brooks, this correspondence serves as formal notice that our client, Ms. Avery Brooks, is seeking immediate release of her rightful share of jointly held marital assets. Your recent actions constitute financial abuse and restraint of access to shared property. Should you fail to comply within 48 hours, we will pursue injunctive relief and damages." At the bottom in bold signature was Carlton Hayes, senior partner. Below that CC'd was Nathan Hale, regional director, Hale Biopharma. Ethan leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. So Nathan was involved directly now, using his influence to intimidate. He felt no fear, only an emerging clarity, like fog lifting over a mountain ridge. He folded the letter neatly and placed it into a red leather folder marked active litigation. Then he called Thomas Reeves. Within the hour, Ethan sat across from Thomas in his oak-lined office. Thomas read the letter twice, tapping the edge of the paper against his desk before setting it down. "They're coming hard and fast," Thomas murmured. "Good, that only strengthens your position." Ethan watched him, his fingers interlaced calmly on his lap. "What's our next step?" Thomas looked up, his gray eyes glinting with quiet confidence. "We don't respond directly, not yet. We continue with the divorce petition as filed, and we prepare to file for a temporary restraining order preventing her from accessing the house or accounts until financial disclosures are complete." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the measured steadiness of strategy replace the hollow ache in his chest. "She thinks I'm weak," he said quietly. Thomas gave a small, knowing smile. "Let her think that. Underestimation is a powerful shield." Outside, the winter sun rose higher over Denver, illuminating the skyscrapers in bands of pale gold. Ethan sat in silence for a moment, feeling his breath steady, as if each exhale carried away the last remnants of doubt. 2 weeks passed with silent tension thickening around Ethan's days. Each morning, he logged into his banking portal to see the same pending approval status on Avery's attempted transfer. Each night he reviewed the case notes Thomas had prepared, methodical as ever. Then, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, Ethan received a text from an unknown number. "Coffee. Important information about AH, Farrell Cafe." 2 p.m. today, he read it 3 times, feeling his pulse quicken. Curiosity outweighed caution. At exactly 2 p.m., he entered Farrell Cafe, the warmth and scent of dark roast washing over him. He chose a small table at the back, facing the door. 10 minutes later, a woman walked in, mid-40s, dark-tailored suit, black hair pinned into a sleek chignon. Jessica Harlow, director of HR at Hale Biopharma. Ethan had met her once at a corporate charity event, where Avery introduced her as the real power behind compliance. Jessica spotted him, walked over without ordering, and sat down, placing a small silver thumb drive between them. Her brown eyes flicked around the cafe before settling on his. "I can't be seen with you," she said quietly. "This conversation never happened." Ethan nodded once, feeling the gravity in her voice. "What is it?" She gestured to the thumb drive. "Emails between Nathan and Avery, 14 months worth. I thought you should see them." He kept his expression neutral. "Why are you giving this to me?" Jessica sighed, her shoulders tensing under the structured suit jacket. "Because this isn't the first time. Nathan has done this before, pursuing married women who report to him, promising them promotions, then discarding them after they've burned every bridge." Ethan's stomach twisted, but he stayed silent as she continued. This time is different, she said, her voice dropping lower. These emails, they contain confidential product research information. Avery was accessing data she wasn't authorized to see and forwarding it to Nathan's personal account. We're talking industrial espionage. The words seemed to echo between them, blending with the low hum of conversation and espresso machines around them. Jessica leaned in slightly. The FBI is already investigating, but quietly. Nathan's father sits on our board, so everything is delicate. I don't know if Avery was complicit or manipulated, but either way, you're going to be pulled in. She stood abruptly, straightening her suit. Use that information however you need to. Before Ethan could respond, she was gone, leaving only the thumb drive on the table and the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air. He sat for a long moment, staring at the small device, feeling the certainty settle deep in his chest like a stone at the bottom of a well. Whatever storm lay ahead, he would face it armed with truth. That evening, Ethan sat in his study, the only light coming from his desk lamp pooling onto the oak surface. He inserted the thumb drive Jessica had given him and clicked open the folder marked HNH correspondence. Hundreds of emails loaded, subject lines ranging from Q2 strategy to dinner reservations to private plans. He scrolled slowly, reading each exchange. The affair was clear, flirtatious messages, hotel bookings, whispered promises of a new life in Madrid, but woven between the personal lines were attachments labeled with confidential Hale Biopharma project codes. Lab results, market entry strategies, prototype data, all forwarded directly to Nathan's private email. Ethan felt a chill crawl across his shoulders. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a crime with consequences far beyond their marriage. One email chain caught his attention. Nathan, once you're free from Ethan, we can finalize Miami. Director title, full relocation package. Avery. What about his financial expertise? He could help if you let him. Nathan, we don't need him. Just get what you can from the accounts. We'll handle the rest. Ethan closed his eyes, his chest tightening with an ache that was no longer heartbreak. It was a cold, precise understanding of the truth. They had planned to drain him and discard him. He copied the entire folder onto his encrypted drive and drove straight to Thomas Reeves' office. Thomas sat in silence for nearly an hour, reading each email in detail, his brow furrowed with focused intensity. Finally, Thomas closed his laptop and folded his hands together. Industrial espionage, federal charges. She could go to prison for this, Ethan. Ethan exhaled slowly, staring out the window at the dark Denver skyline. I don't want her in prison, he said quietly, surprised at the calm in his own voice. I just want her to back off, to sign the divorce, to leave me with what I've built. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. Then we use this as leverage. She relinquishes her claims, signs under our terms. In exchange, we keep this from the FBI. Ethan's eyes hardened as he turned back to his lawyer. And Nathan. Thomas raised an eyebrow. He's not our problem. But I have a feeling you're not done with him yet. Ethan said nothing. The numbers in his mind had begun to balance again. Slowly, deliberately, he closed the folder and slid it back into his briefcase, feeling the weight of finality in its clasp. The next morning, Ethan sat across from Thomas in the polished conference room, the city skyline beyond the glass glimmering under early winter sun. Thomas slid a draft settlement across the table, clear, precise, like any other contract Ethan had reviewed in his career. Under the terms, Avery would receive a one-time payment of $50,000. She would relinquish all claims to Ethan's trust and assets, agree to sell the house with proceeds allocated solely to his trust, and sign a non-disclosure agreement covering both the marriage details and her activities at Hale Biopharma. Thomas tapped the final line of the document. This is non-negotiable. If she contests, we escalate. Ethan nodded, his face calm but his chest taut with silent tension. Hours later, they sat across from Avery and her attorney, Carlton Hayes, in the same conference room. Avery wore a fitted charcoal suit, her hair sleek and makeup immaculate, but her eyes darted with unsteady focus. Carlton glanced through the document, his confident smile fading as he flipped each page. This is absurd, he scoffed. You're offering practically nothing. Thomas leaned back, his expression unreadable. We're offering silence. Avery's gaze snapped to Ethan, anger flashing bright before dimming into something closer to fear. You're blackmailing me, she whispered. No, Ethan said quietly, his voice even. I'm protecting myself. Thomas opened a folder and slid several printed emails across to Hayes. The attorney's brow furrowed as he read, his lips tightening. These are private communications. They are evidence of corporate espionage, Thomas replied smoothly. Evidence that federal prosecutors would find extremely interesting. Avery's composure cracked. She gripped the table edge, her knuckles pale. You don't understand. Nathan said it was just market research, nothing illegal. Ethan looked at her, his expression calm, almost weary. You accessed restricted data and forwarded it to his personal account. That's not market research, Avery. What? Hayes leaned in, whispering urgently to her. She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes but refusing to fall. We need to confer privately, Hayes said hoarsely. Thomas gestured with a small smile. Take all the time you need. The FBI certainly will. As they left the room, Ethan let out a slow breath, feeling the silent tremor of finality run through him. Thomas gave him a brief nod of approval. You're holding strong, Ethan. He didn't reply. Instead, he looked down at the email printouts scattered across the table, each line a testament to betrayal, greed, and deception. Each line another weight lifted from his shoulders. 20 minutes later, Avery and Hayes returned to the conference room. Hayes looked resigned, the confident veneer from earlier now gone. He cleared his throat and spoke with deliberate calm. My client is prepared to accept your terms, he said, sliding the unsigned documents back across the table, with one modification. She wants written assurance that you will not forward these emails to Hale Biopharma or any law enforcement agency. Thomas glanced at Ethan before replying. That condition can be included, provided the agreement is signed today and the divorce proceeds uncontested. Hayes nodded curtly. Avery sat silent beside him, staring down at her trembling hands folded in her lap. Her voice, when it finally came, was thin and raw. Was any of it real for you? She whispered, eyes not meeting Ethan's. He watched her quietly, memories flickering like old film reels, their wedding vows whispered under autumn trees, long drives through the Rockies, whispered promises in the quiet of dawn. He felt a heaviness in his chest, but his voice remained steady. All of it was real for me, that's the difference. A small shiver ran through her shoulders, but she said nothing more. The rest of the meeting moved with mechanical efficiency. Hayes reviewed the final language and Avery signed each page with a shaking hand. No alimony, no further claims to the trust, a single payment of $50,000, silence in exchange for freedom. 2 hours later, Ethan walked out of Thomas's office into the crisp winter air. Snow was falling lightly, dusting the streets in pale gray and silver. He paused on the steps, breathing deeply, feeling each exhale leave his body lighter than the last. Inside his chest there was no triumph, only a quiet relief. The war was over, and though his heart still ached with betrayal, he felt a small flicker of peace warming beneath the scar tissue. Back in his car, he sat for a moment with his eyes closed, listening to the patter of snow on the windshield. Then, with slow certainty, he started the engine and pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the final traces of the life he had once built for someone who never truly saw him. 1 year later, Ethan stood on the back deck of his new townhouse in Littleton, the early spring sun warming his face as he sipped dark roast coffee from a ceramic mug. The mountains rose blue and calm beyond the quiet suburban streets. This place was smaller than their old house, but every brick, every shingle was his alone. His phone buzzed beside him on the railing. A text from Catherine blinked across the screen. Looking forward to tonight, Italian or sushi? He smiled, thumbs tapping a quick reply, Italian, and a walk after if it's warm enough. Catherine was an attorney in corporate ethics at Hale Biopharma, someone he had met during post-divorce compliance consulting. Their first dinner had been cautious, two professionals trading polite stories over salmon and wine. But their second dinner spilled into long conversations about leadership, resilience, and the quiet strength of ethical work. Ethan set down his mug, breathing in the crisp scent of pine drifting on the breeze. He hadn't heard from Avery in months.